My name is Vanessa Willardson, and today joining me in the studio is Amy Trent. She's the author of several books, including the Enchantment Retold series, and she was also the 2024 Praiseworthy finalist for Adult Science Fiction and Fantasy. Thank you so much for joining me, Amy.
Thank you, Vanessa. I'm so excited.
Yeah, thank you. So you are known for your fairy tale retellings, especially in the Enchantment Retold series. Can you tell me a little bit about how you started writing this series, how you became interested in it? Were you always interested in the fairy tale retelling genre?
Yeah, I've always loved fairy tales since I was a preschooler. They're very engaging. They're often beautifully illustrated. And I had my favorite anthology that I would ask everyone to read to me. And my favorite tale in the anthology was The 12 Dancing Princesses, which is for me, a little girl, like all of these beautiful women in these beautiful dresses and piles of shoes, and they're off having like adventures at night, partying, dancing. It was easy to see how like captivating that was. Even today, I'm like, oh, I love this fairy tale. But then you layer in that there's this invisibility cloak, and there's all these cool themes about who's worthy of our attention, who's invisible in our society, and why, and what do we value? So I loved fairy tales as a kid. Fast forward, I'm finishing up my last semester of college, and I'm taking a folklore class for a humanities credit. And one of the assignments in the class was to find a variation of our favorite fairy tale. And that's how I stumbled as a 22-year-old on the tale of Kate Crockernuts, which is this obscure Scottish fairy tale, which is just this fantastic natural gender bend where the princess is saving the prince in distress, and it's a lot of fun. So my graduation present to myself was going to be just amassing a huge stack of retellings because I'm a fan of the genre, and I was just going to get as many as I could and read through them Christmas break. That's how I was going to celebrate my degree, but there weren't any. So I was like, well, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to start writing one. So that's kind of how I became an author. I was very much wanting to realize my dream of spending a whole lot more time in this fairy tale of Kate Crockernuts. And just because, yeah, they're not well known, I had to do some work, had to make that dream happen.
Yeah. And then you wrote this series. Can you tell me a little bit about what the series is about? I know the first book is called Smoke, Steel, and Ivy, and then it goes through Clever, Cursed, and Storied, and then Curses, Diamonds, and Toads. I thought that was a fun title. Can you tell me a little bit about the plot of
course.
Yeah.
So I wrote my Kate Crockernuts retelling, which is the one I won the award for, Clever, Cursed, and Storied. But I got some really good advice from my aunt and mentor, Grace Burrows, and she said, incubate it, write something new, come back to it with fresh eyes. So I still love the fairy tale, The 12 Dancing Princesses. I felt like there was a little bit of a backstory with one of my characters from Clever, Cursed, and Storied that I kind of wanted to sort of interweave. But at the same time, I really value standalone novels. And so I wanted to make sure that I was writing a series where every book has a beginning, middle, and end, because as a busy adult, like I need my happily ever after. I can't delay that for a series, 3 books ahead. So it was really fun for me to take the fairy tale of the 12 Dancing Princesses, to explore it and to write it in a way that felt complete. And then in my prologue of Clever, Cursed, and Storied, which is my retelling of Kate Crockernuts, to sort of weave the 2 stories together so that, you can skip the prologue if you just want to, a solid standalone, or if you want to kind of see how they play together. And that's kind of how I've approached my series. I love taking lesser known fairy tales and exploring them, and then finding ways where they connect in my greater world of fantasy, but making sure that every single story can be enjoyed completely, like by itself. And Curses, Diamonds and Toads, I'm really excited about it. It's a novella that I hope to publish by the end of 2024. And it's a retelling of the fairy tale Diamonds and Toads, which is this wild, weird fairy tale. And I had a lot of fun, and it took me in like different directions. And I don't want to give too much away because it's a weird fairy tale, but I have fun with it. It's going to be really fun. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever heard of that fairy tale, Toads and Diamonds. I had never heard of that before now.
I mean, it's out there, and I believe the author of Ella Enchanted did a retelling of it, but I didn't come across it when, in my youth, or even as a mom, with kids, and I'm buying books like I'm buying tissues. Like we just can't keep them enough of them in our house. But yeah, it's not as widely known, and I came across it in a newsletter, the Fairy Tale Magazine, which is a really fun place if you're a fairy tale enthusiast. They have a seasonal, or not seasonal, what would we call it? They publish semi-annually, and they have a newsletter, and the editor was talking about, she has a fondness for these lesser known fairy tales and would love to see them explored in more depth. And so I, looked at the list and thought, what is that one about? And I read it, and it's wacky. There's a good sister and a wicked sister, and one sister is blessed to have diamonds and flowers fall out of her mouth whenever she speaks, and the wicked sister is cursed to have toads and snakes fall out of her mouth whenever she speaks. And I was like, well, both of those sound terrible. I mean, when things fall out of her mouth, it's not a pleasant experience. I don't care if it's a curse or a blessing. Like that's not good. So that kind of like, whoa, what is going on here? And also, I always like to take villains or antagonists of fairy tales, and I try to, look at them and say, well, what if they had a really good reason? Like, what if they're actually the protagonist? And so that's kind of where my Curses, Diamonds, and Toads novella takes off. It's like, well, what if this poor sister wasn't wicked? What if she just was unfairly judged? So that's kind of where I go with that fairy tale. But I was looking at it and going, no one's going to want to read a story about people coughing up or vomiting or whatever you want to call it, creatures, flowers, and rocks. And so so my character is mute. She's nonverbal for the first half of my novella, because I was like, I need people to be on her side. I need people to be in her head and realize that she's not, that she's not a monster, that she's not deserving of her fate. And I need them to be invested before she starts coughing up snakes. So yeah, fairy tales are fun. And the themes that I really had fun exploring, in that fairy tale were kind of like these ideas of like security and comfort and acceptance, because my character has just decided for the first half of my story, that's okay. I don't have to speak again. Like, if that's what it takes for me to live a normal life, that's fine. And it was really fun for me to explore like how these values that I hold, how they can kind of be sticky and fraught, and how given certain circumstances, being accepting of fate is not a good thing to have, right? Being, settling for the comfort of a nice life, maybe that isn't okay, especially if like my character, you're dealing with a curse where you throw up snakes. So whenever you speak. So yeah, it sounds absolutely bananas when I talk about it, but hopefully when people read the novella, they find a little bit of the whimsy and the fairy tale magic that I saw in this story.
Yeah, in a world where there's so many Cinderella retellings, I feel like it's so refreshing to see a different fairy tale added to the mix. So that's really exciting. Do you know the publishing timeline for this book?
My novella is going to be free to my newsletter subscribers on December 20th, 2024. Hopefully, as long as I can pass all the editing hurdles. Right now it's with my copy editor, and then it has to go through, I do 3 rounds of proofreading before I format and publish. But yes, hopefully by the end of December. My goal was to have it out by the solstice, because in folklore and in fairy tales, there's a lot of magic around, summer solstice, winter solstice, and I wanted to try to, celebrate that in my little fairy tale space, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned the newsletter. How can people sign up for your newsletter?
Yeah. So my newsletter is, you can find it on my website, amytrent.com. It's completely free. It comes once a month. I often interview other fairy tale authors. I end up sharing some pictures of my cat, who occasionally wears dresses. I also have, I have a little, it's kind of like my own little magazine, but I have a feature of all of the cookies and the sweets that I enjoy eating. Cookies are kind of part of my process, at least. I tend to bake and eat and consume a whole lot of cookies when I'm writing. And so I share it, via photos on my newsletter. Yeah, and they're a lot more photogenic than, of course, all of my drafts and scribbled notes and stuff. So, yeah.
Oh, I'm so curious. What's your favorite kind of cookie?
Oh my goodness. I love all cookies, but my absolute favorite is a homemade sugar cookie with buttercream frosting. It's just like, that's my personal favorite. In my house, we also have people who are diehard chocolate chip fans. We have a snickerdoodle lover, and we also have a ginger chewy, not a ginger snap, because we like our cookies chewy over here. So those are the 4 that we love. But I love lavender cookies, lemon cookies, peanut butter cookies. They're all good, and I love to collect cookie recipes. And I have a cookie corner on my blog, but it's hidden. So it's tucked away in a link on my newsletter. But yeah, I love all the cookies. And often when I am doing author interviews, I start asking about cookies. They come up a whole lot in fiction. There's scenes where people are baking cookies or eating cookies, and I'm always like, well, what were they exactly eating? When I interviewed Jessica Day George about her retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses, there was a cookie mentioned, and I was like, okay, but what kind of cookies? And she said, oh, gingerbread. I was like, of course, they're in fairy tale Germany, or fairy tale fantasy Germany. But it's fun. So Vanessa, I have to ask you, what is your favorite cookie?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. I feel like it changes every year. Oh my goodness, you said lavender cookies. That sounds so good. I had a really good lavender cookie like a couple years back. Haven't forgotten about that.
Aren't they magical? Like, you bite into it and I at least feel like it's summer. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. We'll have to swap lavender cookies. That'll be so fun.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I love that you have your cookie corner on your website. That's so fun. Yeah. So just with the writing process, beyond cookies, what else kind of helps you to get into the writing mode? Like, how do you go about the writing process?
That's such a good question. And I feel like for every project, it's sort of a different process. You have to try different things. My process is really an auditory one. I tend to hear what my characters are saying. I tend to the dialogue tends to come first, and then I build scenes around it. I also ask a lot of questions when I come across a new fairy tale. And like we talked about diamonds and toads, well, why was that sister considered wicked? Did we have it wrong? Did she have a good reason for being rude to the fairy at the well? And all these things. And so I guess questions really inform my curiosity, my creativity, and then I'm not quite sure what it is. I think some authors and writers are very visual and they just like paint this beautiful picture, but I'm really drawn towards banter. It's my favorite thing to read, my favorite thing to write. And so I'm always looking for characters who just won't stop flirting with each other. And I tend to listen really carefully to the creative muses and try to capture the conversations, and that was one of the reasons why I couldn't believe that Kate Crackernuts wasn't told and retold, because here's this prince who's sick in bed. Here's this, maiden who has to care for him. All they can do is talk. All they can do is flirt. Like, and that I'm like, well, what are they saying? Like, that sounds like a good time. I want to be a fly on the wall there. So yeah. And then as far as the actual getting it down on paper, that's tricky with being an adult in our modern world. We all wear so many hats, and Brandon Sanderson has a really good YouTube video about how to approach time management. If you want to level up and be a professional author, you have to dedicate so many hours a week toward the pursuit. And that's very helpful, because you can't just expect, okay, I have 20 minutes maybe on a weekend, and that's going to take you years. It took me years to make a novel out of 20 minutes here and there. But still, some of those snatched sessions of time have been some of the most memorable for me, because it was just so much fun. And I wasn't writing for a deadline. I wasn't writing towards goal. I was writing to play and explore and have fun. And so there's definitely value there. It just gets tricky if the goal becomes, well, I want to publish, or I want to, make money, or I want to grow an audience. But if you want to write for the joy of it, there's no wrong way of doing it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Amy. With that, one of my last questions for you is, do you have any advice for aspiring authors that are maybe struggling to find inspiration on what to write about? And what would you counsel them to do?
Oh, that's such a good question. Inspiration feels so fleeting sometimes. It feels tricky to sort of find it, but I think getting curious about the whys, why do you enjoy it? Why do you want this? Why do you prefer some stories over others? Journaling your way through some of those questions. And then also, why are some books ones you want to read and reread? Is it because of certain themes? Is it because of certain structure? Is it because it has this, I can't put it down quality? Is it because it's an escape? And I think that some of that curiosity maybe could help, but also I think it's so important to realize that taking breaks, rests, negative space, all of that is part of art. All of that is part of creative work. It's easier to see it, I think, in other disciplines. It's easy to see the rest written into musical scores. It's easier to point out the negative space in paintings. It's harder to understand that sometimes a manuscript has to be incubated. Sometimes you're doing really important writing by just living your life. I was on vacation this summer in Switzerland with my family. It was magical. We were there for 2 weeks. We snuck in some time in Austria and even a day in Venice, and I did no writing. for the lead up and the vacation. I didn't pick up a pen at all. I was just having a blast being a tourist. And then when I came back, I had this novella for retelling the fairy tale Diamonds and Toads, and it just sort of tumbled out of me. And so I would say maybe just be gentle, give yourself some space, and realize that you're a writer regardless of whether or not you're putting words on a page, and to trust that when you're ready, when you've got the free time, it'll come.
Wonderful. Thank you. I love that. Be gentle on yourself. Amy, do you have anything else that you would like to add, either about the writing process that we have not yet discussed, or about your books, whether it be part of the Enchantment Retold series or any of your books that you've written that you would like people to know about?
Oh, what a generous question. I guess I would just like to say that all authors are word people, and we love to connect, and I love correspondence. And so if anyone has a question, or if anyone is curious about their writing, I would just encourage them to reach out. You can reach out to me, of course, but also to your favorite authors. You would be surprised by how willing and interested they are in sort of like helping other people find their way forward on the journey. And I guess too, I would just like to say, like, everyone's a storyteller. And I think that it's part of what it's there, not as like a bug, but a feature, that we're all drawn to stories, and we're all drawn to sharing and telling them in our own ways, and that it connects us. And yeah, so you don't need to be published to claim your storyteller identity. You don't have to be a writer. Like, it's in you, and you'll find ways of sharing your stories that are special and unique to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Amy. I appreciate your advice and all your insights.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vanessa. This has been fun.